Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. Today we're going to talk about one of those staple budget decks for Historic. At least it's budget in the sense that you don't need a lot of rares or mythics to make this work, but it may not be an entry-level budget deck for many of my viewers. So be sure to watch the whole video before deciding how to spend your wild cards, because there are definitely some ups and downs potentially in this deck. But of course, we are talking about the concept of shrines recently brought into Standard with the release of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, as well as the core concept of Enchantress as a deck archetype throughout Magic's history. So be sure to stay tuned. But before we get into all that, what do you say we do the awkward thing and promote the channel? Allow me to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to the Planeswalker Stronghold for all your new player, free-to-play, budget, and midweek Magic needs. As you can see, we aren't one of these huge channels that fluctuates tons of subscribers on any given day and doesn't even notice. Around here, you matter. Just like these fine folks here, who recently subscribed to the channel and chose to make their subscription public. You see, the YouTube algorithm seems to think that budget arena content doesn't matter. And while I know I can't change that, I think we can. So click the subscribe button to support the channel, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss on an upload. And build a more efficient collection along the way. Now, what were we talking about? Oh, right. I think we all know that they have recently introduced shrines into the current standard environment with the release of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. What you may not have thought about yet is that there is an awful lot of good shrines in Historic. And I think there's a case for each and every one of these to be owned in your collection for at least one copy. Particularly Sanctum of All, the only non-uncommon sanctum or shrine to date. There is also a case to be made, and Wizards, if you're listening, this is a freebie. What I'm really looking for to put this deck over the top is some sort of shrine land. Maybe something in the rare or mythic category. Could come into play tapped at rare. I think it probably should have some sort of pain land trigger on the mythic so that it could come into play untapped. I think at the rare, maybe pay 1 and tap it for a mana of any color. At mythic, I would say it's probably more fair for it to tap for mana of any color. There could also be a search clause. Maybe on a rare, pay X, tap and sacrifice this land, search for a shrine would convert a mana cost less than the X that you paid. On something like a mythic instead, I would say maybe something like a tap and sacrifice to search up a shrine with converted mana cost equal to or less than the number of shrines you control. This could all be very, very interesting. Maybe some sort, if you want to get away from shrines strictly being a 5-color deck, maybe some uncommon lands that could tap for 2 different mana. I don't know if you want to do a cycle of 5, like allied pairs or enemy pairs, or maybe a full cycle of 10, but it comes into play tapped unless you control a sanctum of a one or the other color. I think both of these are good design ideas. Don't necessarily blow this deck out of the water, but definitely give it a much needed power boost in Historic by releasing them in some sort of direct to Historic set. You don't have to worry about these in paper Magic whatsoever, where I think it could end up being overpowered. But Historic and whatever Historic-like things we end up doing in the future could probably easily survive these with power level of some of the other decks around. So give it some thought. All right, now as I alluded to, this may not be the right budget deck for every player. Not only is it an inevitability style deck, which not everyone enjoys playing, it is also a potential large wildcard investment here. 68% of the deck is standard grindable, and about 25% of it would require wildcards, and that is definitely pushing the upper limit of what I would say qualifies as a budget deck for this channel in the Historic category. About 7% of the deck uses wildcards that we have already recommended you invest in and can make good use of here. A couple of notes here. Cultivate is standard grindable because you can get it through Strixhaven packs when you draft. But Cultivate itself is not a standard legal card. That doesn't matter for this, as we're talking about a Historic deck here. But I think I may have messed that up in the previous standard version. I'm not 100% sure. Also, Terramorphic Expanse and, whatever the other card is. One of them is available in Standard. The other, of course, is only in Historic. I may have put them in the wrong place. I can never keep straight which one is which. Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, they do essentially the same thing. They're both commons. It's a card for card equivalent, even if I did put it in the wrong place on the graphic. But that 25% wild cards, it might be a big number for you. It is mostly uncommons, 12 uncommons and 3 rares to put this deck together at what I consider to be an entry-level position. I definitely recommend that you play the deck in Standard, decide whether you enjoy playing this sort of deck before you make the investment. And this is definitely a deck that will continue to grow and get better over time, not only as your historic collection grows, but as they print more relevant cards for it, be them shrines or not. All right, so let's take a few minutes and do a deep dive deck tech on what we put together here for historic shrines. As you can see, the deck is not arranged by where the cards were, like we just looked at it. So we're just going to go through all the cards here, starting with Sanctum of Tranquil Light. Of course, this is a Shrines deck, so we are essentially running 1 copy of every available Shrine to Historic. This one's ability to tap down a creature late game for a single white mana kind of gets ridiculous, and this is an activated ability, not a tap ability, so depending on how much white mana, you can take out either their biggest threat, or I should say tap down their biggest threat, or possibly their entire team. It really gets ridiculous very, very easily. Generous Visitor, I think we are familiar with from Standard. He just gives out +1/+1 counters. He doesn't have to give them to himself. He doesn't have to give them to another creature. He can do what he wants. Gingerbrute, this guy is just a really phenomenal 1 mana common artifact creature. It has haste and the ability to make it unblockable effectively. Only creatures that also have haste can block it, can really make for some interesting late game situations, especially when you drop things like All That Glitters on it, and it gets +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control, which obviously in this deck can become a very large number. But even if you only have the Gingerbrute with All That Glitters, that makes it a 3/3. Pretty darn strong. Dawnhart Geist is one of the more cuttable common cards. It just procs off of enchantments and helps you gain life. Michiko's Reign of Truth is basically a saga that does All That Glitters. So again, it makes your creatures bigger, and then it makes a nice big creature in and of itself. The Lost Wisdom Shrine from Standard, I think we're all familiar with. It blocks, it flies, it might get bigger, it even mills your opponent. One that we're not as familiar with is one of the key cards. If you have the ability to search up a shrine, this is probably one of the early ones you want to go get, assuming you have a black mana source for it. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. That's right, it drain lifes your opponent based on the number of shrines. This is a quick, easy path to victory. We are familiar with Boundless Vigor from our Standard conversation. The fact that it can put +1/+1 counters on a shrine creature you control is pretty good. This one having Trample makes it really nice because it is very difficult to block effectively. The other strong candidate is Lost Wisdom with its ability to fly. And let's see here, where did it go? Our Shared Purpose with Vigilance is probably the 3rd strongest candidate for it. But backing up a little bit, we're familiar with Borrowed Time as an enchantment-based removal piece. You can certainly play with that quantity and that of Intercessor's Arrest, depending upon what's going on with the meta, how relevant vehicles are, things of that sort. Definitely play with that if you like. Idyllic Tutor is a lovely search for an enchantment, which basically gives you a second copy of all of your various shrines out there, as well as things like removal. It just becomes a very versatile tutor for this. as is Search for Glory. I know we talked about this in our standard conversation, but its ability to search up a land if you decide to run the snow package, a legendary card, which aka is all of your shrines, or a saga like Michiko's Reign of Truth, makes this a very versatile rare to have. If you don't have it, it's not that big a deal. I wouldn't necessarily run a wild card on it, but even as little as we drafted Kaldheim, it's not unusual to think you'd have one copy on this. The Ancient Wars allows you to deal damage directly to a player. This is another great win con, although it is a little less effective than the Sanctum, as that is a drain effect. The Humdin of Infinite Rage deals damage to any target equal to the number of shrines you control. Any target, that means player, planeswalker, creature, whatever. Very versatile, probably the best red shrine they've ever printed, and it just gets better with age. And the Sanctum of Shattered Heights, you pay 1 and discard a land or shrine card, which you may have land cards, but you probably won't have a lot of extra shrines in your hand, and deal damage to target creature or planeswalker where X is the number of shrines you control. This is really good if you've got to do it, but this is not a shrine, at least in this build, that you will activate a whole lot. This is also one I might consider cutting if you are running both the Infinite Rage, the Ancient Wars, and the Stone Fangs. This one could be a little redundant. Cultivate is attainable in standard drafts through the magic that is Strixhaven, but it is only a historic illegal card. I think I messed that up in my analysis of doing the standard whatnot. I think I included this in the standard build, and it's not. Next up, we have one of the rare wild cards that we would use for this, and that is Enchantress Presence, an enchantment itself, and once it's in play, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Notice that it says cast, not resolve, not enter the battlefield. Just casting it is enough, so even if they counter it, it will replace itself. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest. This is probably the most important Sanctum in this deck, as it allows you to generate mana of any color and allow for a great deal of fixing. And of course, green is one of our primary colors in the deck. You happen upon a Glade. This is one of those standard concessions to allow you to search up some basic lands and put those into your hand for later play. If you don't have the Cultivate for some reason, certainly a second copy of You Happen Upon a Glade is a decent substitute, with the potential added upside that if you don't need to search up basic lands, or if somehow you have all your basic lands in play and still haven't won the game, you can return a permanent, aka one of your shrines that got destroyed, back to your hand from the graveyard. Very nice backup plan there. We are familiar with Shared Purpose. We looked at that as our Vigilance creature. This allows you to go wide and create a lot of spirit tokens in mid to late game, and give you the ability to swing in with a bunch of different stuff. Cleansing Fire. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life for each shrine you control. It's pretty basic. It's not very sexy, but it will keep you alive and keep fueling that inevitability clause that shrines is really all about. Sanctum of Calm Waters allows you to draw a bunch of cards. And I will caution you, there is a may clause on this, and there are times where you're going to want to be conservative, because drawing 7, 8, 15 cards, don't draw yourself into a lose the game situation because you're not able to draw a card. Hidden Cruelty from Standard allows you to destroy creatures equal to your number of shrines. This can get really, really brutal. And as a 2/2 Death Toucher, it really discourages your opponent from swinging. It's nice stuff. Humdin of Night's Reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent discards a card for each shrine you control. frankly, it's just mean, particularly if you're playing some kind of control deck and they have to just pitch their hand every single turn. It's pretty funny. Solemn Simulacrum is one of those early rare wild cards that we spent. He does a lot of double duty here, not only creating a 2/2 body to block for us, but he also searches up a basic land card for us and provides mana fixing in this greedy 5-color deck. And when it dies, it replaces itself by drawing a card. It's basically an automatic 2-for-1 on the Solemn Simulacrum. From there, we need to talk about the Humdin of Seeing Winds. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card for each shrine you control. Notice this one does not have a May clause. So just like we talked about with Sanctum of Calm Waters, be careful and make sure you don't draw yourself into oblivion. Because if you can't draw a card, you lose the game. Humdin of Life's Web, this is another one of those that creates spirit creature tokens and makes a bunch of 1/1s and able to go wide. There is no activation cost on this, it just happens. And one of the more important and interesting cards in this is Sanctum of All. It is 1 mana of each color, so it is difficult to cast. If you don't draw this and you have the opportunity to tutor up a shrine, this is definitely the one you want to go get first. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard. That's right, this will also get shrines back from your graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search this way, you have to shuffle. So make sure to watch those tutors when you have put things on the top of your library. If you have a Sanctum in play, it may not be the wisest choice to do that. You may have to wait and then tutor something up right before you're drawing Sanctum of Calm Waters or Humdin of Seeing Winds triggers. It gets a little tricky, but in some cases it's very doable. Second clause on Sanctum of All. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, which is not really hard to do, the ability triggers an additional time. So all these things we've talked about happen twice. Keep in mind some of those have, with the standard shrines, activated abilities which you have to be able to pay for if you want them to really do anything on both those occasions. But this is an absolute powerhouse. Obviously, if you have the wild cards or you really enjoy this deck, you want to go for multiple copies of this. I would say 2 is a no-brainer. 3 is probably still very, very strong. The reason I'm not recommending more than 1 for this deck is 1, this deck is not for everybody. It's a long-term inevitability style win in the end kind of deck. Some people enjoy those, some people don't. But by running things like your Idyllic Tutor or your Search for Glory, you are effectively running more copies of that, but with the ability to search them up without having multiple copies of a card that is really only useful in this deck. Idyllic Tutor and Search for Glory can very easily be put into a much wider variety of decks than just this one. And finally, we're wrapping things up with a Shrine Steward, a common card from Standard right now. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for an aura or shrine card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle. So keep in mind, not only can this fetch up all of your different shrines for whatever situation you might be in, but it can also fetch up all that glitters if you might then have enough mana to play all that glitters and swing for the win. That can be pretty nice. The land base, I'm showing you here with just basic lands, but we have talked before in the standard version about reasons that you might want to switch that over to the snow package there. We're running a variety of pathways here, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse to search up basics if you need it, along with Fabled Passage to search up a basic if you need it. Uncharted Havens we are running as a multicolor solution, primarily here because it is available in the Kamigawa set that you are presumably drafting to get a lot of these shrines to begin with and a lot of these standard Enchantress related cards. If you are running the snow package, there is a similar snow variant which comes into play tapped, and you choose a color as it comes into play, which would serve the exact same purpose for you. So there it is, guys. Again, this deck is not for everyone. Definitely build the standard version, play it for a while, see if you like this style deck. This is something you can certainly grow into and make better over time. And I don't think this is the last time they're going to print shrines. I think we're going to see them again, and this deck will continue to get better over time and might be a perfect entry point for Historic for the right kind of player. So check it out and see what you think. Comment down below, let me know what your initial impressions are. Alright, so with all that having been said, don't forget, smash the like button like Hulk would. And of course, comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And one last thing, myself, I'm coming to you from America, and I have noticed that about 1/3 of my viewership is coming from the US, and about 1/3 is coming from various countries. And there's about 1/3 of my viewership that is just getting lumped into other. So to let me know you got to the end of the video, throw me a comment down in there and let me know where you are watching from.